Welcome to the Holistic Ascent podcast, where we dig into specific tools and resources to elevate your health in tangible and applicable ways. My name is Lexi Heron, and I'm your host of the podcast today. Before we get started, it's important to note that not every tool or topic explored here will be applicable to everyone. And that's the beauty of bio-individuality, and each of us bringing our own unique experiences and circumstances to the table. None of the information in this podcast is medical advice, and I always recommend working with a qualified practitioner to address any specific health concerns you may have. All right, let's dig in. Well, hello all. Today I have the pleasure of meeting with a friend and colleague of mine, Marc McLean, and he is an integrative nutrition gut health coach, journalist, and an author as well. And I'm just really excited to have this conversation today because I actually met Marc via Instagram, social media, about a year ago now, and he invited me to be on his podcast and to talk about minerals. And it was just really cool to meet a like-minded, holistic wellness individual and colleague in the same space. And Marc specializes in gut health and all of these things and has an incredible testimonial that I'm excited for him to share with you all today. But Marc, without further ado, thanks for being here. And would you mind sharing just a little bit more about yourself and what you do in the wellness space?
Yeah, sure. And first, thanks for having me on. I loved our last chat when you came on my podcast, and I got lots of good feedback about that and all the wisdom you've got in minerals. So great to be on the other side of the mic. So yeah, I'm based in a town called Dumbarton. It's near Glasgow in Scotland. Professionally, most of my life, I was a journalist. I worked in the media, and it was halfway through my career where I first started experiencing gut issues. And I never got much help from my doctor. He basically couldn't give me answers beyond this medication, and you'll basically have to take it for the rest of your life. So that wasn't really the answer I was looking for, and it set me down a path of trying to figure out things myself. That was way back in 2010, Lexi, so it's a long time ago, and things were quite up and down. In the beginning, it was just IBS I was told I had, which is kind of an umbrella term for when the doctor doesn't really know what's going on. Things were up and down, and I felt at one stage I was really on top of things, and then around 2017, everything crashed. Things got 10 times worse. And that's when, around then, I was diagnosed with severe ulcerative colitis, which is going a bit more down the severe route than IBS. So that's an inflammatory bowel disorder. It can get quite serious. There's the potential for surgery. I was passing blood like 10 to 15 times a day. It got quite serious back then. So ultimately, it led me down this natural health route to try and fix things myself. And fortunately, I managed to do that. I managed to reverse that condition, and I've been in remission, healed now for over 5 years. And all of that just really inspired me to really share what I learned, kickstart my podcast, and that's what I've been doing for the past year and a half now with the podcast. It's changed its name a few times now, but it's now called Mission Colitis Remission, and the main aim is to help other people who end up being diagnosed with colitis.
I love that. I love that you've taken your story and this impactful experience for you, and now you're putting that information out for everyone else. And if you all didn't catch that Marc's podcast is Mission Colitis Remission. And I just love that because it's such a specific deep dive into this illness that so many people have been experiencing. And I don't know about you, but I feel like gut health issues are just they're everywhere nowadays. I meet people every day that are like, oh my goodness, I have XYZ going on with my gut, and I just feel like it's slowly killing me. And that's horrible.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think everyone knows someone who's got a gut issue problem. And when you do start diving into some of the stats, it's quite frightening. It's like they say that it's the number one cause of hospitalizations in the US is just for gut issues. And apparently, like, I think it's like 2 out of 3 people in the US are experiencing at least one gut issue as well. I found some of these stats from some of the amazing guests I've had on my podcast as well. That was Heidi Moretti. She's the author of the Gut the book Gut Fix, and she shared some of those stats with me. But in terms of ulcerative colitis, that affects a smaller percentage of the population. It's around 1 million people in the US apparently, and here in the UK it's around 300,000.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. It's just so interesting to me. And so what specifically, I don't know, what, if you don't mind going into a little bit more depth of your process and getting this ultimate diagnosis, because for a while you were sitting there thinking you just had this blanket term IBS, and then you were probably seeing multiple specialists or trying to figure things out. What ultimately led you to getting that diagnosis?
Yeah. Well, with the gut issues, which I experienced way back in 2010, that led me down a holistic health path where I was trying to figure things out myself. And to be honest, in a way, it was a bit of a blessing, because it led to me really looking after my health on all different levels, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and learning a lot more about me as a person and looking after your health in all of these different ways, rather than just like the nutritional side of things. So I got to learn a lot more about me, and I definitely did get on top of things for a good while. I kind of felt like, right, I've got it here, I've done it, I'm on top of it. And then in 2017, I was going through quite a tough, there was some family stuff going on which was leading to emotional stress. I was also in a job which wasn't very fulfilling. Basically, I wasn't looking forward to the work every day. And then on top of all of that as well, my dad, his health was really poor. So my dad struggled with alcoholism, and it was quite apparent to me in the last half of 2017 that he didn't have long to go. And I really began worrying about that, and I was worrying about how my mum was going to take it, and it was, and that was on my thoughts constantly. And I didn't quite realise the impact that emotional stress was having on my body physically. And that's when I started seeing blood in the toilet pan. And I was like, this is getting a bit worrying, what's going on? And then it was increasing. It was happening more, 5-6 times a day, and then more and more. Then ultimately, my dad died just before Christmas in 2017. So Christmas, family time of year, everyone's want to be together. It made it even more difficult. And my mum really crumbled, and I took on the responsibility of dealing with the funeral, dealing with family, trying to organise all of that stuff. And I was basically running on autopilot and not really paying attention to what was really going on in my body. And then in the aftermath of that, just at the turn of the year and beginning of 2018, at that point I had lost maybe about 15-20 pounds of weight. I was just looking terrible. Again, at that point I was passing blood daily, 10 to 15 times a day. So I got a colonoscopy, went to the hospital for a colonoscopy, and usually colonoscopies are not much fun for any human. And I had 2 previously at that point, and they used to take like 20 minutes, 30 minutes at a time, and I would just dread the pain it would cause, all of this like cramping in your stomach. You're sitting there with your bare ass hanging out, and there's all of these nurses in the room. It's a wee bit awkward. But that time, the nurse was like, I see what's going on here. And this was only like 2 minutes into the procedure. She says,
Wow.
and I know what's going on here. So straight away, it was over and done with. And she handed me a piece of paper that said severe ulcerative colitis. And at that point, I actually hadn't heard of ulcerative colitis. I didn't know anything about it. And I'll be honest with you, Lexi, the overwhelming feeling when I got that diagnosis was actually relief. It was like this, because I'll be honest, that a few times it had gone through my mind that I might have something like bowel cancer. Right. Because I was passing blood that often, and I was thinking, what the hell could this be? So when I was given a name for this condition, and it was just a gut condition, they could give me medication, I just felt relieved. I was actually quite pleased that we knew what we were dealing with.
Right. Well, I can totally relate to this too. I actually had my whole run through of my own gut issues at the beginning of this year, and I had all of those same thoughts. I was like, I know colon cancer is on the rise in the younger populations in the US specifically, and that was terrifying to me. And when I saw blood in my stool and started having like severe, like it almost felt like my stomach was like ripping anytime I ate food. I just was like, I think something seriously wrong is going on here. Like, am I gonna die? Like, I mean, you go through all these things. And I ended up having a colonoscopy too. And I listened to a bunch of your podcasts because I was like, I want to get all of these holistic health tips and tricks. And I felt so relieved after. I mean, I didn't end up with a diagnosis, but I ended up with a clear colonoscopy, and I was able to actually run some of my own functional lab tests on myself. And I ended up finding I had all the markers for celiac disease. And I was
All right.
like, this is very interesting. And so it's just, I can relate to the journey of like feeling like this is the end, or like I don't know where to go from here, and I just want to have an answer. And I think that's so empowering when you do find that. So that's
Yeah.
amazing.
And I'm just interested to know, were you going through some stressful periods in your life at that point? Because what the whole background with my dad, the main message I was trying to get across with that, looking back on it now, putting the pieces together, that was the big trigger for me, I think. It was the emotional stress that really brought it on.
Completely. And I think that's a huge common thread that I see not only when I work with clients, but when I hear individual stories like yours. And then I look at mine, I'm like, wow, I had a really big move. We moved into a house, and then it had mold, and it had nicotine and all these things that made us really sick from our environment. But it was also really stressful because we didn't have that safe space or that home to be able to move into that we thought we would. So it was amidst all the chaos and stress as well. It always seems to be a common thread.
Yeah, I'm sure those were big factors.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's incredible that you made that connection so early on with your stress and your physical health, because I think that's just something that's so imperative, because then you can learn how to handle these other stressors a little bit better and support your body through that. So would you mind sharing with us like what you've been doing since you received your diagnosis, as far as addressing whole body health and moving forward?
Yeah, so when I look back in things now, Lexi, because it's been such a long period and trying to figure out what exactly had gone wrong, I kind of see the whole scenario as like this big holistic health puzzle I've always been trying to figure out, and I've been getting little pieces along the way. So in the early days, I learned that, I always knew intuitively that nutrition would play a big part in the healing process. It just makes sense that what you put into your body is going to have an impact on your health. So I did do a lot of digging in terms of addressing nutritional deficiencies. I learned quite a lot about that. That was one piece of the puzzle. And then further down the line, obviously learned about the impact that emotional stress then has, having to address that as well. But at that point, I still had this diagnosis. And although I was given steroids and anti-inflammatory medication for the colitis, and I was really grateful for it at the time. Like, I'm not anti-medication. I really did need it in that time of crisis. But based on the fact that I had some previous success dealing with the IBS stuff, and then also combined with a bit of a gut feeling as well, I was like, this can't be it. This
Yeah.
me taking medication for the next 50, 60 years, that it just didn't feel right. I was like, there's got to be more answers. I need to just keep on this journey and find out more. So I did continue taking my medication. Like I say, it was needed at the time, but I decided to dedicate a lot of time to try and find out how I could try and manage these symptoms myself and see if I could find other solutions. And then just by, well, I don't know if there are coincidences in this world, but I ended up getting another piece of the jigsaw puzzle by pure chance, maybe about a year after my diagnosis. So I was going to visit my relatives in Canada with my mum, and I was to pick up my medication on the way to the airport. So we headed there. I stopped in at the pharmacy, and I was there to get my anti-inflammatories, and he says, can you come back in the afternoon? Your prescription's not ready yet. So I had the option of going back in the afternoon or missing my flight to Canada. And obviously, you know which option I took. So headed off to Canada and I had no medication with me.
Wow.
And I was like, it's okay. I've been fine for a while now. I'm good. I'll be okay. But then when I was over there with my cousin, he's passing the beers. I'm drinking Tim Hortons double coffees every morning, along with donuts on the side. All of this started adding up, and then it got to day 10, I think, of the 2-week holiday, and I had a massive flare up. It was like straight on the toilet again. All the blood was back. I was doubled over, cramping in the toilet, then curled up in the bed. And I was like, man, I'm here for another 4 days. I've not got my medication. I'm in bad shape. What am I going to do? So I did what I used to do back in the early days, and I just jumped onto Google and tried to find out natural solutions. I was typing in things like natural solutions for reducing inflammation because I knew it was an inflammatory bowel disorder. And I must have been doing a bit of research for maybe half an hour or something, and I came across Wim Hof, the Iceman, which you may have heard of before.
Mm-hmm.
He's the crazy Dutchman who's become a bit of a global phenomenon these days. And he's a complete hero of mine. So I read about how he has this Wim Hof method, and for any of your listeners who are not aware of it, it's just a combination of a breathwork practice, cold water exposure, and then also some mindset techniques to assist the body with healing naturally. The one thing that really caught my attention with all the research around the Wim Hof method was that it drastically lowers inflammation in the body. So straight away I was like, whoa, this is interesting. Like, if I go in a cold shower and I do a bit of breath work, both of these are like free, they're nothing to do with medication, and they bring down inflammation. Surely that's worth trying. Over there in Canada, I just started giving it a go. So it was like a 10-minute breathwork practice. These are based on pranayama, ancient Indian breathwork techniques, which have been around for thousands of years. I started doing those twice a day, and then I would go in a cold shower for maybe like 30 seconds, whatever I could brave in the morning. I would try that. And then I noticed, like, after a few days, I was like, wait a minute, this burning feeling in my stomach isn't quite as bad. And then I wasn't getting quite as many reactions to foods like I used to, because my diet was so restricted at that point. I was getting so many bad reactions to food, but things started getting a bit easier with that as well. So I got home and I was like, I'm going to continue doing this. This is the real deal. Continued, and things just kept getting better and better. I was able to eat more foods. I was feeling more clear-headed. I was having more energy. My mood had improved. And then it got further down the line, and I said, I'm gonna try a little experiment here and start tapering off my medication. Now, before I carry on with this story, I'm not saying to anyone else, you should do this. Your medication's your own thing.
Yep.
This is not advice I'm giving out. But what was encouraging me to do that was the fact that the medication was always going to be there. So if I somehow started, my condition started deteriorating again, just doing the breath work and everything else, I could always just pick up my medication again and start taking that for the inflammation. But I put it to one side. I continued with the breath work. I was doing it 2 or 3 times daily, still looking after my diet, still looking after stress levels. And then 5 years on, and I've never taken that medication again.
Wow, that's amazing. So you found that this worked so well for you just out of necessity, being out in Canada, and then when you came back, you were able to really dive into that full throttle. That's incredible. Did you add any other specific healing tools into your journey then as well? Like, did this kind of open up Pandora's box for you to like, oh, there's so many other tools out there to explore?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like, say, the you know what it's like when you're a bit of a health and wellness nut like you and I. You just want to
Yes.
experiment with everything.
Yes.
At that point, I started getting really into saunas as well. I know you love saunas.
Yeah.
Just to really detox the body, give it a helping hand to get rid of toxins that had built up over years. I was finding that was really helping as well. And then at one point, I came across the American health guru, medical medium Anthony William. and he's the guy who's behind the whole celery juice movement. And I started giving celery juice a go as well, and I was finding that really beneficial. That also has anti-inflammatory effects, and it's really good for digestive issues. So I then added that into the mix, and when I pulled all of these different tools together, and I basically made them part of my lifestyle, my everyday routine, it just has kept me on this even keel where I've not had a single flare up in years now. Don't get me wrong, I still get things like heartburn from every now and again. I get a little bit of acid reflux. Sometimes if I'm feeling a bit stressed, I will feel it in my gut, bit of heat there, but nothing like a flare up. I kind of feel now that I've got all the tools where I can keep on top of this now.
That's amazing. Do you find do you stay away from certain foods, or do you prioritize other specific foods to help kind of maintain this remissive state, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah. The thing about diet, and I reckon you'll probably agree with this as well, is that there's no perfect diet for everyone, and we've got so many experts out there with different trends and fads, but we can't apply this one diet to everyone. So while I have the same symptoms as someone else, I may have the same symptoms as someone else with colitis, they might react differently to a certain food than I would. It's all about, I suppose, listening to your own body and hearing what's really going on. So for me, there are just some things that I do avoid. Like I am not good with like tomatoes and tomato soup and things like that. That gives me really bad heartburn. So does things like, I used to really like hot porridge in the morning, like oats and mixed in with different. I used to mix it in with a little bit of peanut butter and some bananas and stuff like that. And for some reason that's been giving me quite a bit of heartburn, so I avoid that as well. And overall, just in general, there's the kind of basic stuff where I avoid gluten. I don't completely cut it out, but I minimise dairy, because here in Scotland we don't get access to raw milk. Raw milk's illegal here, and I remember you telling me how healthy it is for you, and I loved it. But it's so hard to get raw milk here. It's actually illegal, which is just crazy.
Wow, that is crazy.
It is. So the pasteurised stuff, I kind of avoid that. And just your generic sugary foods. So it's those kind of three categories I avoid. Yeah. But don't get me wrong, like we've all got to live a little. So it's, I kind of keep to those dietary principles like Monday to Friday, and then at the weekend, like I'll have a bit of pizza, or I'll have a Chinese takeaway meal. At the weekend, I like to relax things, because you don't want to drive yourself nuts with all of this stuff too much.
Totally. I love, we call it the 80-20 rule in our household, where like 80% of the time we're setting that foundation for ourselves, and then 20% of the time, like go enjoy a cocktail with a friend, or go, eat something maybe you don't usually do, as long as it doesn't put you out too much, but
yeah, it's got to be done.
It's important. I think that balance is so key in maintaining mental and emotional health with all of this, all the physical health too. So
yeah, 100%.
Hey, it's Lexi. I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. This episode is sponsored by Heron Holistics, Functional Labs, and Homeopathy. Heron Holistics' goal is to bring empowerment back to you in your wellness journey by using functional lab tests like the hair tissue mineral analysis and GI map stool analysis. Heron Holistics is able to provide you with individualized protocols that are unique to you and your life circumstances. You can learn more about working with a qualified practitioner through Heron Holistics by visiting heronholistics.com and finding the service and booking guide, also available here in the show notes. Mention the Holistic Ascent podcast to get 10% off your services. Now, let's get back to the show. Well, I do have another question. So we know like ulcerative colitis and other GI diseases like Crohn's and celiacs, things like that, ultimately result in decreased mineral and nutrient absorption in the gut, just due to the disruption in the gut microbiome and the way that we're able to take in nutrients from our food. What are some tips and tricks that have worked for you to ensure that you're replenishing all of those minerals and making sure you're getting the most bang for your buck from what you're consuming?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, obviously there's the basic one where we take decent quality supplements to try and replenish what's missing, and you also do your best to minimize stress, because that's going to rob the body of minerals. But a really cool tip that I came across, and it's particularly helpful for people with IBD because of the damaged gut lining and basically the general soreness when you're eating like heavy meals. One thing that I've introduced for many years now is what I call super smoothies, and that's essentially just really healthy smoothies with natural ingredients like fruits and vegetables mixed in there, with things like coconut milk and things like ginger, which is really good for the digestive system, frozen bananas. I'll also put in some like plant-based protein powder, like made from like rice protein, because that's easier on the gut than maybe whey protein. I have a shake as my first meal of basically every day. Now, the good thing about that is that when you're mixing all these ingredients in the blender, well, number one, it's a liquefied meal, so it's easier to absorb. It's easier on the gut, especially if you've got a damaged gut lining. But secondly, as well, when you're adding in all of these ingredients, sometimes like I'll throw in like frozen broccoli or maybe frozen mango. You're getting these ingredients when they're at their freshest. Like if you, for example, cooked broccoli, you're going to lose a lot of the enzymes, the vitamins and minerals. But when it's going in fresh into the shake and it's already liquefied for you, you're getting more of the benefit from that.
Right. And I was listening to one of your podcast episodes, I think about, I don't remember which episode it was, but I was listening to it from a few weeks ago, and you were talking about how maybe sometimes you might not be able to tolerate a specific food in its whole form, but when you blend it up into a smoothie, you might be able to tolerate it and digest it better because it's already broken it down a bit. And I thought that was a really valuable piece of advice for people too, to just experiment and figure out what works with you best and your body.
Definitely. That's the thing, like, there's a catch-22 for people with colitis, because we're told to eat as much fruit and vegetables as we can, and we need the vitamins and minerals. But a lot of people with colitis do struggle with certain vegetables, especially things like broccoli, the kind of rough vegetables, especially when the gut lining is sore and damaged, and they would typically avoid those kind of things. And what I say to people is, at least if you're giving these shakes a go, you could try throwing in a little bit of the vegetables in that, and then when it's blended up into that liquefied state, see then if it gives you any reactions. If it doesn't, then you're good to go.
Right. I love that. I think that's a great piece of advice and totally customizable to each individual, which is incredible. I know you've also talked a little bit about goat kefir too. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that? And you've had guests on that have talked about it as well.
Yeah, definitely. This is really interesting, this one. I interviewed a really interesting woman on my podcast earlier this year. Her name's Shan Nix-Jones. Okay. And she runs one of the UK's leading gut health companies. It's called Chuckling Goat. And they basically produce goat's milk kefir, but they also do like gut microbiome tests and everything. And she's a really amazing woman with the coolest story ever. Can I dive into her story a little bit? I'll share it with you quickly.
Please do. I would love to know.
This is a cool story. Basically, Shan, she's from America and she moved to Wales. She met a man called Rich, who was a Welsh farmer, and he had ulcerative colitis as well. But when he went in for surgery in hospital, he ended up picking up MRSA in hospital, and this flesh-eating bug. And he was on his deathbed and in their farmhouse in the living room. And the doctors basically said there's nothing more we can do for him. They basically, because this was contagious, they didn't want to catch this bug as well. So she was left nursing her husband. He was dying on the couch. And she started doing all of her own research about bugs and bacteria and all of this thing. And they obviously lived on a farm, so they had goats. And she read about Kefir, all of the good bacteria, and he was obviously dealing with a situation where he had all of these flesh-eating bad bacteria in his body. Yeah. And she basically did an experiment where she thought, I'm just going to start giving him this goat's milk Kefir, the stuff made on our farm, and let's see what happens with it. So he was drinking it internally, but she was also putting it topically on his wounds, the Kefir. And bit by bit, the wounds started closing up. And
Oh my
day by
goodness.
day, she was measuring the wounds, and things got better and better. And about 3 weeks later, he was up on his tractor and just going about his farm duties again. She basically saved his life with this goat's milk kefir.
Wow.
It's
That is
mind blowing.
amazing. I love that.
It
The
was
power of
incredible.
Yeah, the power of goat kefir. So I
Yeah,
need to go buy some of that this week.
yeah. So
My
that
goodness.
she obviously knew I'm onto something big here.
Yeah.
This is literally life saving stuff. And essentially,
Wow.
what she did was she crowded out the bad bacteria in his body with the good bacteria, and she basically says, "Look, this is one of the best biohacking tools you can have for your body. Just to take this kefir on a daily basis, and it's going to look after your gut microbiome, and then you're also going to have those mental health benefits as well with the whole gut brain connection." When I interviewed Shan, I decided to order a few bottles of this stuff, and I was expecting just not just for my food to maybe digest a bit better, or maybe get less reactions to some foods, maybe to maybe like the tomato foods or something. But the big difference that I noticed after about a week was this huge change in my mood. Like,
Wow.
I'm someone who takes a while to get going in the morning. I'm a bit of a grump in the morning, and I just noticed, I really noticed a difference. I was feeling sharper, feeling a lot more alert, and I was like, this is definitely the kefir. This is definitely what's doing it.
Wow.
So then I learned just to make it myself as well. It's really easy. You can go and watch videos on YouTube. It's really cheap to make. You can buy the kefir grains on like eBay or Amazon. You get a mason jar, fill it with the goat's milk, and then keep it at room temperature for like 48 hours, and you're good to go. It's really easy to do, and I love the stuff.
Wow, that's awesome. Do you drink it like on it? Do you consume it on its own or do you use it in your smoothies? How do you use it?
I actually quite like the taste of it, so I drink it on its own. It's got quite a kind of sour taste. It's quite strong, and I think if I mixed it in with my smoothies, I don't think it would go very well. So I
Okay.
I just drink it on its own in the morning, and I normally have it like half an hour before I have my smoothie.
Okay, great. So you're really getting all of that good bacteria into your gut first thing, lining your gut before
Yeah,
you even eat or drink your first meal of the day.
yeah.
Okay, very cool. I love that. That's a great piece of advice, too. Well, I do have just a couple more questions and then we can wrap it up here. But if someone's experiencing issues where they just aren't feeling hungry anymore, or they're just feeling like they just are having this bad relationship with food because of the gut distress it's causing. I know you've mentioned you felt like your gut was on fire, and I've
Mm.
experienced my gut feeling like it's literally tearing while eating foods. That just causes just this bad disassociation in my mind with food sometimes. Do you have tips or tricks for someone who's trying to like combat that and slowly start to reintroduce more foods back into the diet?
Yeah, I suppose the main piece of advice I would give is just this is around mindset really, because that is the starting place for all of this. I would just advise people just not to let your mind run away with itself, because when you really start dwelling on the symptoms and you really start focusing on the heat in your stomach, or the acid reflux, it almost becomes like a vicious circle. And
Mm.
then the stress worrying about it makes it worse. The inflammatory state becomes even more. And I I just always try to remind myself whenever symptoms do flare up again, because like I told you recently, I had COVID a few weeks ago, and because of that, my stomach health, my digestive health went downhill quite a bit, and my mind went into overdrive temporarily. It was like, wait a minute, what if this ends up in a flare up again? What if things start going backwards again? And what I had to just remind myself was, listen, this is just a moment in time. We all pick up bugs. We all struggle with digestive issues every now and again. This is all normal. It's part of the human experience. Things will settle again. So maybe not the answer you were expecting, because you were maybe expecting me to talk about food and different tips on that. Really, mindset is such a big thing, and it's so important not to let the mind run away with itself and come up with these potential negative outcomes that it can do so well. And we need to just kind of stop that in its tracks, calm ourselves down, and just get back to eating a clean diet and staying stress-free.
I think that's so powerful, Mark. Thank you. Well, if you were to give 3 pieces of advice to someone who's experiencing either ulcerative colitis or just a really bad gut issues in general, what would 3 tidbits of advice be that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Okay, so obviously we've covered quite a lot in terms
We
of
have.
mindset and nutrition and supplements and all of these things. So this answer is maybe going to be a wee bit unexpected, but I really want to underline the importance of getting back to basics. And that's in terms of sleep, sunlight, and water quality. Those 3 main things. And those are things that so many people in this 21st century world have got all wrong now. It's just this world we're living in where we are on our devices all day. We're in front of the TV, we've got our mobile phones in front of us, we've got tablets, laptops, and we're getting in all of this blue light, the green light. It's messing with our circadian rhythm. We're going to bed late at night, and then we're not getting proper, deep, restful sleeps. And sleep is one of the most powerful things that we can do to help the body to restore and heal. So that's one thing that we can really do, is focus on the sleep. And I know you're big on that as well. I remember seeing on your Instagram you were wearing the same shades that I've got.
Yes.
The blue and green light blocking glasses, they're amazing. Do you still wear them?
Those work so well. Like if anyone's struggling with sleep issues, I'm like, okay, I know it sounds crazy, but you just need to try it like a couple nights and see if it helps. And we were gutting our house, and so we got the opportunity to redo stuff. So we just got these circadian rhythm lights in our house that you can switch on to like a nighttime mode. So it makes them like kind of looks like we're crazy people with like the red lights in our house, but you can flip it throughout the day. So I think I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, definitely. And listen, it's just so important. I think some people kind of scoff at that and they think it's not that important, but it's huge. When our circadian rhythm is messed up and we're not getting proper sleep, we're all over the place. Our body's completely stressed, and that's not giving yourself a proper foundation to heal. So that's number one, getting that basic right. And then secondly, it's just getting out in the sun. The sun is obviously so healing. We don't get a lot of it in Scotland, but getting out in the sunlight, because so many of us are stuck in offices all day. We work at home, we're within these boxes, and we're not getting the natural sunlight to really heal the body at a deep cellular level. And then finally, water quality. There's so many people drinking water from their tap these days, and they don't know how bad that stuff can be for you. I suppose it depends where you live in the world, but I know that most towns across the world, the tap water quality is not good. We moved to a new house about a year and a half ago, and I really began to notice like a chemical type taste with it. Fortunately, I've got a friend who works with Scottish Water, the main organisation here in the country. He sent out an inspector to test my water, and the level of chlorine in my water was 4 times the average of any other household. It was because we live apparently a few hundred yards next to the treatment plant, so the water comes closer to our house more quickly and it doesn't get time to dissipate. So we were getting this really strong chlorine in our water, and that completely messes with the gut microbiome. So what we do now is we've got a water filter in the house, and even when I'm cooking vegetables and stuff, I'll even use the filtered water for that.
Right. Wow, I think that's so, you hit it right on the head, because I think that sleep, sunlight, and water quality are so impactful, and those are very simple foundational things that we can go back to. We don't have to stress about finding the right supplement or the right like workout routine, like all of those things will come eventually with time, but when we can focus on those foundations, then we give our body that opportunity to heal. That's awesome. Well, Mark, this has been an awesome conversation, and I have so much I can learn from you. And I just thank you for being here. If the guests that have joined us today want to learn more about your podcast or find you online, where can they do that?
Yeah, sure. So the podcast is called Mission Colitis Remission, and my website is colitisremission.co.uk. And if there's anyone listening just now who wants to learn a wee bit more about the all the different strategies that I've talked about for healing the gut, I've got a free ebook on my website. It's called Gut Rescue. When you go into the website, a pop-up will appear and you'll be able to download that for free.
Awesome. And then you do coaching as well too with individuals?
Yeah, I actually just qualified as a integrative nutrition health coach just this year.
Okay.
And I'm going to be launching a group coaching program just next month. So that's going to be the very first one. And thereafter, hopefully building upon that and helping people with colitis to finally get these symptoms under control.
That's amazing. So if any individuals out there are interested in a group healing program on ulcerative colitis, you should be in touch with Mark and stay in tune with that over the next month. So thank you very much, Mark.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I really enjoyed this conversation with Mark, and I just think it's cool to find connections and other individuals in the wellness space that seem to be on the same wavelength. Like having this deep appreciation for Western medicine, but also feeling that strong pull to get to the true root cause of our issues and not wanting to be on a medication for the rest of our lives. I love that Mark also understands that there's so much nuance in the health space and not every diet, practice, or tool will work the same for everyone. I completely agree with that. I love that he made that connection so early on in his wellness journey that the stress in his life was causing a lot of his physical symptoms as well. And I'm hoping to have more guests on in the near future talking about specific practices we can utilize and implement to help us better handle our stress and release stored emotions and change our thought processes. So in turn, we can truly take back our health at a physical level as well. I loved Mark's practical advice on the super smoothies. I think that's something that's totally great that can be individualized for every person, whether it comes down to dietary restrictions or certain foods that are tolerated or not tolerated. We can pack a ton of those nutrients into a super smoothie and have that daily. I am a big fan of this. I know sometimes I struggled in the past with actually having an appetite in the morning, which has gotten a lot better as I worked on healing my metabolism, but that's been something that's been super valuable for me, is just starting my day with all those nutrients packed into a smoothie that's easy to consume and gentle on the gut. I also loved hearing more about the healing powers of goat kefir. If you have an amazing goat kefir story, please do share with me because I would love to hear more about this. I have yet to make my own, but I love that Mark gave us simple steps to make that on our own at home. A couple other things that I just really appreciated about this episode were the 3 pieces of advice that Mark would give to the audience. And those were to focus on the foundations of getting enough sleep at night, getting sunshine and stepping away from the blue light and our devices, which I'm going to be doing right after I get off of this recording, as well as focusing on high quality water. And I love it because those are just such foundational things that can totally change the trajectory of our health. And they are great practical tips that we can go work on right away, and we don't have to find that magic pill or whatever to figure that out. But anyways, I thought this conversation was super valuable. I hope you took a thing or two from it. Additionally, if you enjoyed this conversation or you took something away from it, I would love if you'd be willing to leave us a review. Let me know what you liked. I'll see you on the next episode of The Holistic Ascent. Thanks all.